we do monthly programs on the first, second Tuesday, except during the summer and except during December when people decide they're too busy. So we'll do 8 of these a year, and there's quite a diverse set of topics. They're all recorded unless I screw up, and which so far this year I haven't. So they're on our YouTube channel. If you go to search for the Oregon Carvers Guild, you'll find all of them from the summer of 2020 on. It's quite a spectacular archive, actually. Um, Sometimes the speakers are live, sometimes they're not. In this case, they're not. Lonnie Acord lives in a place where he doesn't have great broadband access, and he's doesn't do Zoom. So we could not get him live, but we got this next best, which in some sense is even better because we get higher quality imagery. I only know Lonnie a bit. I knew of him, of course, and I've met him most recently at the Lincoln City show. He's been a fixture for a long time. I never knew about this organization called Sea Alaska. That's Southeast Alaska. It's a major indigenous organization that is massively productive. They sell things on their website, including art by Lonnie. And so these are 2 of Lonnie's things that he has on the website. And under the description of him, this is the succinct summary of who Lonnie Acord is. And I think it's a particularly good introduction. He's non-native, but he's been adopted by the Tlingit tribe. And so he is able to legitimately produce and sell this stuff. He follows traditional forms. He's got his own style, and I wish we had more time for him to talk more about that. But he weaves his own stories into the carvings that he does. He loves the artistic stuff. He likes the old myths. And interesting, he's about 70. He began carving when he was 6 years old. So in round numbers, 60, he's been at it 60 years. I think his grandmother gave him a knife. His dad grew up in Alaska. He grew up in and around First Nations peoples. And he became a very prolific, competent carver as a boy in school. And he had different experiences. One of them was to take a class that got him hooked on Tlingit masks, and so that is his primary form. I interviewed him on April 15th. He does not want to disclose exactly where he's at, but just it's within reasonable striking distance of I-5. And he's got a studio that you'll see a lot of pictures of. And it's both an art studio and a working studio. So what I've got in the lower left-hand corner, you will see the name I gave to this thing. This first one's a 14-minute clip. It's a walkthrough of his art, not this painting. He's got a collection, so this just happens to be what it shows. But I'm going to start playing these videos, and I'll pause in between them. And if you have any questions, comments, or whatever, you can put them in the chat. I'll try to observe what they are.
Then we got the carving bench.
So is this your primary workspace?
This is where I work. And I thought I needed some color, so I made a red snapper design.
So you have a pretty large shop, but this is your working area.
Yeah, this is where I work.
This is your chair. And
I have another shop that has my bandsaw and a bunch of that stuff, and it's a dirtier area. But anyway, that's a shark right there, and the bottom's a shark. The top guy is May, and I did that when I lost one of my little dogs. And I did it as a shark because when you fed her something, she'd like bite your fingers. She's kind of like a shark. Then we go over here to, this was in my Bella Coola phase, and that's a moth. And I've had that around a long time. It's fallen onto the floor and broken, but that was one of the early pieces that I did. The next guy there is a gumboot or a chitin, And there's a famous rattle that that kind of looks that way, and that's how I got that kind of design. What I like about it is when I worked for the school district, they had a tree next to the admin office, and they wanted it cut down, and it was beech, and so I took a piece home and I carved that out of beech, and it's really hard. The next guy is a wolf, just a little wolf head, forehead mask, pretty basic. This is a paddle with a. I'm adopted. I'm a coho, so this here's the head, right here, and then the body comes down. And I didn't have enough room to put a whole tail, so I just put half a tail on him. You want me to pull each one of these pieces out?
Oh,
Or can you get?
I'll shoot them right through.
Okay, that's a sculpin, and it's a sculpin bowl. And the next one below it is a puffin. I really like these bowls, and I was down in wherever that aquarium is down in Newport, or they had this little puffin, and he's in there, and he was putting on one heck of a show, splashing around. And so I came home and I did a puffin bowl. And then this is a mosquito. And this guy here is a shaman, and it had two heads on it. It had an octopus head off the back, but I dropped it and it broke. And so it just has the octopus tentacles, and so it's like a spirit for this shaman. Then the next guy is a shark. And it's not like the sharks that you think of. They have dogfish. They're the same as a shark. They're small. They have a little stinger on the back. But what I kind of like about this shark is that piece of wood that I carved it out of is not very big. It was about that big. And this part here is a branch. This was the tree coming here, and this part was a branch that came off. And I thought I was being pretty clever by, using the branch.
That's alder too.
Alder, yeah. The guy on the bottom is a puffin rattle. It's like in the form of a raven rattle, but it's a puffin. Alrighty. Then there's a total story about that guy. We won't go into it, but I call it my tsunami mask. And
you had that in Lincoln City, and
yeah,
I recorded that story.
Okay. And then this is a mountain goat headdress. And then we have a raven bowl. These bowls aren't very big because they would just put seal grease in them, and they would dump their fish or whatever, kind of dip it. That's why the bowls aren't very big. The octopus or halibut bowl is when you see these halibut bowls, usually they're flat. They're just flat, and they don't have any, liveliness to it, But I was able to, give it a little bit of life, and I really enjoy that. The next guy down there, that is a skate, a Pacific skate, and that's where they theorize that the ovoid came from. On a baby skate, it had these ovoids in their wings, and that's where they theorize where the ovoid came from, but I don't know. Then there's a tray. It's called a tray. That guy. Alrighty, now we're cooking. This guy is a speaker staff. But it's also a rattle.
Pay attention.
So, and this is yellow cedar. It's 2 pieces right here. All right. Okay, where are we? This picture, it's Mockintons is the artist, and he's from Anchorage. It's pretty famous. He kind of has to grow on you. I have a bunch of his work. Friend of mine moved down from Juneau and said, I've been trying to sell this picture. Nobody wants it. I said, I'll take it. And it fits in my carving shop just fine. So he gave me the picture. I love it. Let's go with the next one. That's a woodworm. I just finished that last week. And so the woodworm's on top, and then you can see the woodworm holes all through it. And then there's a famous mask that come from the Akwans, which is out of Juneau. And a lot of he was a shaman, I think, and a chief. And a lot of his masks were multiple figures. And so the guy on the bottom is the human shaman, and he's got mice telling him some secrets on the bottom. And then there's an otter, and another otter on top. There's 2 otters, and those are friends of the shaman. And then the lines with the circles in them are octopus tentacles. Okay.
And the nose pieces would be bone or carved?
Bone. Yeah, they'd be bone. So the next guy is a forehead mask, and he's the raven who steals the light, and that's a common myth. But the way I painted it, it has the dark on one side with the stars, and then the light on the other side. That's kind of a neat piece.
All right. And a medallion, is that copper?
Yeah, it's copper. Then we'll come over here to this piece. This is another dance staff. And what I like about there are a couple things. I didn't have any wood to carve, so I went out and there was a pallet sitting outside. This is a piece of pallet board, and it's a wolf transforming into a killer whale, like a sea wolf. And what I think is clever is the tongue goes up and around, and his lip goes clear down here. And
Very clever.
I had this space to fill, and I didn't know how to fill it. And that's this right here. And I looked in the mirror, and with my hair that's always out of control, I put my hair right up in here. So there's a little bit of me in most of these things. But yeah, see, it's thin palette.
How much of these designs that you do are pre-drawn and fixed, or are you designing on the fly as you go?
I design on the fly. That's a discussion that my high-end carving group has. And one of the guys had a schematic. He's doing a mask, and man, it is like, I said, I don't know how you do that. I get to carving, and I have to move things around till I'm happy with them. So some guys draw it out. I don't. I just have an idea. And I had this one in Lincoln City, and that's a kingfisher. And the staff represents the spirit of a tree. And here's the tree right here, the bark. But then I removed the bark, and now here's the spirit, the backbone of the tree is right there. So I thought that was clever.
That's very clever.
And the next one is just another shaman, an otter, a mouse, and a human with octopus tentacles. Just kind of fun to put a bunch of things together.
It's very complicated.
And then the other one's a killer whale, and that I think I told you that story. And then we can come down here. This is a killer whale headdress.
How do you do the fabric part of that?
You know, I forget where I went, like Joann's or something, and just got some fabric and just started painting it. You can't screw up.
So you're painting the fabric,
Yeah,
as
just
opposed
paint.
to sewing and embroidering and.
No, I just painted it, and then I took it to a seamstress and had them put a backing on it. She was getting kind of tired of me. I every few weeks bring one in. And then I just finished this not too long ago.
That's really cute.
I wanted to do a crab. I didn't have a very big piece of wood. I thought, oh, well, I always wanted to do a crab, but you know, it wasn't as easy as
Again, did that start as a green log?
yeah. Actually, it was just a piece of alder that I'd run through my planer, and I was using it for a stand for this at Lincoln City. It was stuck in there to hold it up. So I just kind of repurposed it. And then that's a frontlet. That's a little shaman guy. And I'd run out of paint. And so I get my paint from Home Depot. It's just latex. I just go get a, sample, and I say, I want this color. Well, it's the only one in here that's not consistent with the green that I normally would use. And I don't care for it too much.
Are the shaman images always with the nostrils?
No.
How do you know it's a shaman?
Because I said it was.
Would I know? Would anybody else know?
No.
Okay.
It's one of those things that I have to tell you.
Yeah.
And then there's that, I was talking about a spoon. That's that first spoon that I carved years ago.
That's staggering.
And then little boats and this and that, just some stuff.
So that would be the style of boat that you have tackled as a kid?
Yeah.
And what are
those are called soapberry spoons. There's a little berry, and they would whip them up, and it'd be kind of like ice cream. It's kind of bitter, but it was a dessert. And they had those special little spoons for doing that. Okay, then when we moved from Astoria to here, I had this armoire. I think that's what it's called. And this one had a mirror in it, and it fell over and broke. So I thought, oh, what am I going to use that for? So I made it into my library. And
may I take just a scan?
Sure.
Okay, that turns out to be one half of the tour of the shop. I cut this in half, and I put the last half at the end. If you're still hanging around and want to see it, I'll play it at the end. It's another 12 minutes, which is the other half of the tour. It's what's amazing to me is the variety of output that he's got, and it's just quite remarkable. So this next one is what I call the basics. This is going to set the stage for Bill Holm and form lines, and after this, you'll see a bit more of a shop, and then we'll take a pause for a minute.
I'm kind of selective on who I want to teach anymore, and I have a few guys that pester me all the time, and I try to figure out what's their motivation. And I know what their motivation is they want to crank out a piece and take it to their gallery and make money. And I'm not, and I've never been into this art for money. I'm into it because I like the culture, I like the people, I like the style. It's been in my, in me forever. And it kind of bothers me that beginner carvers, they really don't want to put in the homework, learn the form lines, and do their study, and then they get a piece and go sell it. And it's not just here. I mean, it's in Alaska too. You get I don't know this for a fact, but it seems to me that there's not that many guys that can really carve a little face or a Tlingit face or know the style. They start carving because their uncle showed them some stuff, and they carve a little bit, and they've carved 2 or 3 masks, and they're decent. So then they go and work with a master carver on totem poles and big pieces. And some of them are pretty good, but they're just in that for the money. And so they skip the basics, the fundamental stuff.
Let's stick with that basics nucleus thought just for a second here about how would you recommend people today learn the basics? What would they read? Where would they go? What videos? What authors?
I don't know about videos. There's a book I have sitting out here, and it's called The Analysis of Form. And Bill Holm wrote that book in 1964, and he defined, there was no terms on the form line. He defined form lines and told everybody what a form line was, because till that time it was just a design, And so he defined form lines, ovoids, U forms, made a vocabulary out of it. And it's kind of a hard book to get through, but if you can get through it, it's so much easier. I have
buy the book and study it yourself.
Yep.
Or take a class.
Or you can take a class. I think the university or Sea Alaska Corporation has classes all over Southeast Alaska, Hoonah, Angoon, Ketchikan, Juneau mostly, and they'll have an instructor. Usually it's David Boxley Jr. And I think,
how do you spell his name?
Boxley. I don't know how.
Bosley.
Box Boxley. I'm not sure how you spell it.
Okay.
They're out of Kingston, and they're about the best form line, in my opinion, the best form line guys around. They are really, really good. Uncannily good. I mean, it's unbelievable what they can do on form line. I'm adequate. I can fill a space, but set me down and do a whole big screen it's kind of rough. But if you can get to those guys and take some, you're way better off. If you don't do that, sure, you have a knife and you can carve something out, and I have so many people do that, or a lot of people. Okay, now what color do I paint this? Is this black go here, or where's the red go? Or because they haven't done the fundamentals. As soon as you learn the form line, it's easy, then you don't have to go and ask me or somebody else, what color do I paint this and why? And so that's the way I went. I took form line class, and then there's quite a bit of carving classes up there in Alaska. Down here, I don't know. There's a carving academy. Dick Wilk is teaching at the carving academy, and he's pretty good. He's really good.
Yeah, he also comes to Vancouver once a year. So,
he's just a sweet guy.
Yeah, I've taken one of his classes.
Yeah, and he's good. Other than that, I'm kind of guarded on who I bring into my circle, because I don't want them just to carve something and go sell it. I want them to learn. And over all the years, I've had only a couple guys that grabbed it and went with it.
Okay, so that's the basics for that. Julie, we'll talk about that in a minute. I want to point out behind his head are these miniature masks. There's 4 in a row, and then there's a couple on the vertical. in this part B of the tour of the shop, he talks about those and he advocates those are great beginner projects. They're small, they take small amounts of wood, smaller logs, and he'll talk about wood a little bit later. But he said, I asked him, how long does it take? He said about 2 days for a beginner to tackle one of those. It would be a great way to do that. Get used to the form lines, get used to the painting, kind of go through the process in small forms before you tackle some of these more complex things. This is a 3 minute talk about his masks.
What was a mask then? What might a mask be now? Kind of a thing.
I would say that the masks that you carve now would be the same as they would back in the day. You know, unless you see them danced, they're just an object on the wall. But once you see them actually used in a ceremony and stuff, they kind of come alive. And the more you see that, I think the better you get as carving.
Are there other uses in us of how masks are used or were used, other than dance?
There's a couple things, like a frontlet. That's a chief's frontlet. Would a certain clan would have a certain raven or a wolf or whatever, and so you'd know what side they're on. Either they're ravens or wolves. And so in a performance, if they're dancing, you know which side they're on. They would have masks that represented all kinds of different spirits and things. Then you get into the shamanism part of it, and they use masks. And they use them for healing and whatever, you know. I don't get into that a whole lot. These little maskettes, those are actually something that they would use. The shamans would have I think 8. They'd have 8 of those little spirits in their case. Now, for me, the masks, I like the structure. I like the design. I'm to the point now where I try to tell a story, my own personal stories, and put it in a mask. And I believe, and I'm not the last word on this, but I believe that even these old pieces had different meanings. You know, it wasn't a culture where they wrote anything down. It was always passed down and oral. And so I have a few of these masks in here tell a story. If you now in 50 years and somebody took and had a couple of these masks in the museum, they go, that's really a neat mask. I like it. What's it mean? Then you'd have people that are kind of educated and they go, well, that's a killer whale and it's Tlingit style, but they still don't know what it is till I told you the story. And I'm in that zone right now where I'm telling my own personal stories. Since I'm up here, I'm down here in, Washington, and I don't participate in any, cultural things. So that's what I.
I'm going to just keep we'll pause after this one. I asked him about what else he carved besides masks, because there's a lot of mask history here.
You identified early on with masks and you stuck with masks. That's how you've identified yourself to me, as where someone said, you've been carving masks for 40 years.
Yeah.
Is that the dominant style you do now?
I do. Masks is where I started, and I learn on every one of them. I learn something every time, and I've carved a bunch of them. But then in the last 10 years, maybe, I decided, well, it's time to do some other stuff. So I started carving bowls, and that's a whole different deal. Bowls. They're a little harder to carve, I find, but they're fun. So they're basically a mask So once you learn that basic how to carve a face, then you can carve just about anything. So I've done some speaker staffs, and I just did a paddle, excuse me, and bowls. Don't really do boxes. I don't do plaques. So
Could you put speaker staffs in context?
a speaker staff would be, you're up in front of everybody, and you'd have a staff, and you bam bam and get everybody's attention, or you could speaker staff, a dance staff. If you're dancing, you'd hold it and dance with it. I've got a couple here.
So it says, I'm talking, you listen. Is that the,
Yeah,
I got the mic?
yeah. As far as I know, So
And how would a dancing staff be used?
same way. I mean,
I mean,
they would have it in their hand and they're dancing.
follow me kind of thing?
No, not really. It's just
Everybody would have a
everybody
dance?
might have a paddle or something in their hand to dance with.
How would a paddle be used?
Same
Is that-
same thing. Just they'd hold on to it, kind of dance.
Symbolic paddle,
Yeah.
not a functional paddle for a canoe
Well, yeah,
or both.
both I think. Yeah, I just carved a paddle. Yeah, and I think I'm going to give it to my nephew to dance with. So
Have you carved totem poles?
I've carved one.
One,
Boy,
a big one or a small one?
it was 8 feet tall. Now, where I was in Juneau, you don't have cedar. It quits growing around Wrangell. Red cedar quits growing at Wrangell. So as farther you go up the coast, get up to Juneau and Haines and Cluckwan and Yakutat, no more red cedar. So they didn't have big totem poles like they do now because they bring cedar in. But back in the day, they had their clan houses. And then what they'd have inside the clan house is a house post, is what they call it. And they would just be sitting inside, and then when that house wears out or where they want to move, they take those house posts with them. Now those are out of spruce, and so I carved an 8-foot spruce house post. And man, my neighbor had a big spruce tree. I said, hey, I'd like to have a chunk of that. So he had a dump truck and he dumped a couple pieces off in my driveway. And we cut the back off and I hollowed the back, and then I got a design and I put the design on it and I started carving it. And it was going okay. Carving it green, it carved all right. Then I got kind of tired and I took it, and it was all roughed out. And one side was almost half finished, pretty close to finished. And I put it in the garage and set it up. Didn't really like it once it stood up, And the thing started to check. It started to dry out. And it had big cracks in it all over. I thought, well, that's not good. So I panicked and I got a bunch of wedges, out of spruce, out of the same piece. And made the wedges and I put glue in there and I tapped them all in there, and then I recarved it, and that looked really good. The other side was all checked. Well, this is over about 2-year period of time. Before I know it, all of those checks on the other side all closed up, which is, so then I got it back down. I thought, I need to finish this. And so I started my adzing, and it was not good. The knives weren't working. Nothing was working. So I went with these kind of chisels. And that worked pretty good. And the thing with spruce is it has a hard grain. And in between that hard grain is a soft grain. And then a hard grain and a soft, hard, soft in between. And so they would tear it. It was really hard to get a clean cut. But most of the house posts and stuff up there were out of spruce.
Were the house posts structural or were they symbolic?
I think they're symbolic because they moved them. Now well, that was going to be just a model of a house post right there.
This is the drawing you
Yeah,
have by
that
the door?
drawing. I was just going to put it. It's kind of a. They made them like out of planks, or they made them real sculptural. Like a totem pole. Now I made mine like a totem pole.
So they would tell stories on the house books,
Yeah,
relative to their clan or their
Yeah,
history.
whatever they wanted. Yeah, mine was called the Big Fisherman. Now there's a whole story about the Big Fisherman. Do you want me to tell you that story?
That's where I cut the tape. That's a long story. So we won't go there. I will point out that in the Guild of Oregon Woodworkers, Clark Moss has visited the Leluska Foundation site about an hour northwest of Portland, where they do dances, and it's a chance to experience the dances and see these objects in use. He says quite a remarkable thing. If anybody has that in their background, let me know if you want to share that. So I'm going to pause here, and Julie, I'm going to have you unmute. Julie, what I'm trying to do here is identify those that have an interest in this style of carving. And I know Julie does. She's taking classes. I asked her to share her own. And John Niebergall is online as well. I asked him to share, and then Joel Allen is here as well. Julie, you got, I put these side by side, these books that you have. So do you want to
Oh, thank you.
unmute, introduce yourself and your background here and where you're at on the journey?
I am Julie Niemeyer. My background in carving is short. I tried out all different sorts of carving and landed on North Coast native carving, just because it just speaks to me. And the first class that I took was years ago with Larry at the Guild of Oregon Woodworkers, and there's my first and only spoon. It's a bear, and
So Julie,
it has been.
I'm gonna highlight you just for a second.
There you go. Okay.
Let's try that. Oh, then you can show your spoon.
It's been sitting on. It's been sitting on my bench for years, and every time I think I'm pretty good, I pick this up and it humbles me again. So I put it back down and work on something else for a while. So one day maybe I will actually finish it. So,
and that's the Adam McIsaac project.
yes. And it was out of cherry. And it was very, very hard. And it was my very first attempt at carving. And I thought, this is just too hard. I can't do this. And I put away carving after that until just the last couple of years. And well, it was the pandemic because we could carve. So I have been taking classes at Port Townsend from James Johnson. He's a young man who is from Juneau, and his history, he is a North Coast native carver, and he started out, the story that he told us was that he just carved, and he was good at it, but he never learned form line, and an uncle or somebody came to him and he says, you're very good, but your work is awful. You need to learn form line. And so he did go to Bill Holmes' analysis of form, and it is the Bible of form line. It's the book that don't waste your time looking elsewhere until you get it. It's in its second edition. The The second edition actually has the form line is usually in 3 colors, black, red, and a tertiary blue, green color. And it actually has the blue, green color printed in the pages, and it's worth the time. It is kind of a difficult book to get through, but if you're truly interested in this sort of carving, go there first. And then the second book that I ended up buying was the Learn by Doing, written by Karen Clark and Jim Gilbert. And their first book, it's a curriculum for schools it started out in Canada and Alaska, Southwest Alaska. So, and it's a simple book, easy to follow, great place to start. But if you want to know more about the form line, the differences between the different clans, the different areas in Alaska, and what makes a Haida versus a Tlingit. They have learning by designing, the two volumes, and they're very good books. So the first class I took with James Johnson was a paddle class, and the paddle is 5 feet long. We were to add out in a 2x6, 6-foot long piece of Alaskan yellow cedar. And after a day of chopping, I thought my hand hurt clear up to my shoulder, and I didn't know if I was ever going to make it through the week-long class. And the next day, at the class, they had draw knives on the wall. And I asked if that was fair for me to use a draw knife. And he says, "Oh yeah, go ahead, use whatever you want." So I eventually did finish the paddle, but I haven't put a design on it yet. Only because I've been spending my time designing, and I'm actually liking the drawing and the designing portion of form line art. So I'm working on a panel right now that's sitting on my bench. It's about 18 by 24 inches long, 2 inches high, and it's gives me peace. When I have a hard day, I come out here and I carve on it a little while, and every so often I look at it and I think I need to run it through the planer and start over again because it's just horrid, but I don't. So but this year is for, I don't know, the last year and a half, I've been carving with this knife, slightly crooked knife, and one straight knife. And this year I had the honor of meeting a wonderful man who's retiring from carving masks, and he gave me the honor of buying his crooked knives. I came home and couldn't wait to try them out. And my carving improved. I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh, I feel like I have been building a house with an axe. Now I've got knives that really have improved my carving. But the analogy I want to give you is more of you've got to learn the game first. If you can't go out and buy Callaway golf clubs and expect to be a good golfer right off the first tee, you have to learn and practice and before you can buy the good golf clubs. So
And I will
I'm
point out
happy.
the club has a tool library, and Julie, you were able to borrow some of the
Oh yeah.
crooked knives and maybe adds, I'm not sure, but we have a tool library. And so another way to get started is to try some of the stuff that we have before you go out and invest, which is the purpose of the tool library. Yeah, Judy, I'm going to switch gears. And John, are you still here? I'm going to have you. There we go. John, do you want to introduce yourself, John, and kind of where you're at on the journey, and maybe your mention of Adam McIsaac again?
Yeah. Name's John Ubergall. Been carving since I was in Boy Scouts a long time ago, and have gotten back into it. Newburgh has a carving club, and I've been participating with them. A couple years ago, I also took the class from Adam, have a ladle like Julie had, not complete. Someday. I'm an 80%er on most of my projects. My interest came, I spent some time in Alaska in college days. And as a kid, I grew up, went to the Chief the Laluska Longhouse and the dance. And so that's where my interest has come from. I mentioned in the notes, those 3 books are awesome. I've done some drawings with those and some patterns out of it. But for me, recently, this is the book that I use for a number of projects, and I'll put the publisher and the author and everything in it so you can see that. But for me, I love it because they're very usable drawings, and they give scaled drawings for them with some instructions. And so I've done a few things out of yellow cedar. And again, I don't tend to finish things, so I like small projects. Another one that's got me going, I spent some time teaching up in Sitka, Alaska for some school projects. And I met a local artist up there, and he told me about this book and the Sea Alaska Heritage Institute. And I've been fortunate to be able to go fishing up in Alaska the last few years. So I'm working on some halibut hooks that I'm hoping to complete here in the near future. So that's my journey. I'm having a good time with it. Done a few knives on my own. I like making the knives part of it. Just having some success, and I'd say jump in and give it a try.
And you recently retired.
Recently retired, yep. And I have a number of friends that are have their own wood shops in school, so I don't have trouble planing down my yellow cedar or any other stock that I need.
John was a shop teacher at Sherwood High School.
Yeah.
And Joel, let's see, is Joel? There you go, Joel. Joel and I met by accident a couple of years ago, and then recently got reconnected. And he said, when I didn't realize, but introduce yourself, Joel, and kind of where you're at, and tell your story about Bill Holm and Dwayne Pasco.
My name's Joel Allen. I'm a special ed teacher at Sherwood Middle School, not at the high school. So I too have access to plenty of woodworking, big equipment that I couldn't possibly afford or have room for. I started my journey, and it's been somewhat of a punctuated journey. When I was in college, I was at the time a newly minted anthropology, archaeology major. And because of that, I kind of went to the front of the line and actually took 3 classes, a series of 3 classes from Bill Holm. The first one was two-dimensional art. So that's where we learned the form line design. And, it really didn't resonate with me at the time, because it was like, he kept saying it was art, but there were rules. And it's just like, of course, I think it's an example of youth being wasted on the young. But so then the second class was 3-dimensional art. And then that's when we started talking about totem poles and learned all about the Tlingit and the Haida and the, Kwakiwak and, you know, all these groups, and found out like the Tsimshian totem poles, always see them chopped up all together frequently because they're in segments, but all the other ones are sort of merged together, and you don't really see any good place to, you know, take a chainsaw so you could drag it back to your museum. So anyway, and then three-dimensional, or I mean the dramatic art, excuse me, was when Bill started talking about his personal journey through the process of becoming a hamatsa. And hamatsa in Kwakiwak culture is sort of an elite group of usually men. The hamatsa are people that can channel the cannibal spirit of the north, Bak Bakwala Nuksikwe. And it's funny because all the different things associated with cannibalism, you know, blood, eating, they find ways to describe it. For instance, the raven, we hear the raven, we hear caw, it's cawing, but they hear it as hop. Hop is the word in Kwakiutl for eat. And so the raven is calling out to eat. Mosquitoes drinking blood. Well, that's the spirit of Bakbakolanuksikwe too. And there's a whole series of stories. But anyway, Bill was telling me as part of his transition to Hamatsa, he had to carve a caricature mask. And if you've ever seen a picture of Bill Holmes, but if you've ever seen a picture of Bill Holmes, you see he's got this almost a page boy haircut, glasses, big smile. Well, he comes out and he's talking to us about this caricature mask, and all of a sudden this caricature mask on someone else comes out and they start dancing across the classroom. And we'd seen masks come out all the time, you know, conversion masks and all these different, you know, wolf masks and all this stuff. And to see this huge mask with Bill's face on it come dancing out across the stage was really something. And that actually would come back to me in the last few years as sort of an interesting linkage. Now, I don't know if I made up a PowerPoint slideshow to show some of the pictures associated with the totem pole in Sherwood. Is that something I can share out? Would that be okay?
You should be able to try sharing. Yeah, you should be
Okay.
able to try it out.
Let's see. Okay,
That works.
good. Okay. So we inherited from the high school, thank you, John, this totem pole created by a man named Dwayne Pasco. And this is the front of it. And that's what it looks like from one side. And that's what it looks like from the other. And I really wanted to, we were for the year that I got interested in this, we were looking at really working on culture and connectivity of the kids at our school. And for those that aren't familiar with Sherwood is pretty darn white bread. You know, there's not a lot of people of color, and the kids in our school that were of color were not really represented in the activities that were done. So what I wanted to do is I want to rededicate this totem pole. It was put up when our school was a high school, and rededicate it because the plaque that was put up really doesn't talk much about the author, Dwayne Pasco, or the artist, Dwayne Pasco. So I contacted Dwayne. I emailed him and I explained who I was, and he started. I said we really would love to basically redo this plaque, have it talk more about the totem pole and less about why, you know, who put it up there, and he was all for that. And then we started exchanging. Well, I started exchanging bona fides because here I had a real life, you know, artist corresponding with me. And of course I started pumping him for information, and I explained that I had taken a class from Bill Holm and taken classes over at the Sitka Center for the arts and ecology out on the coast. And I had been taking 3 summers worth of classes from a man named Jay Havoc, until Sitka had a bad case of political correctness, and they told Jay that he couldn't have classes anymore because he's not a native carver, he could not do any more classes unless he had, number one, either hired somebody from the area that he was going to carve from to co-teach and thereby share his fee. And in this case, for the summer that ended up not happening, it was going to be Bella Coola. And if anyone's familiar about the BC coast, Bella Coola is way up there. So it would have been cost prohibitive to hire somebody, or Jay could, his other option was to completely donate his entire fee to the local tribe. Now, keep in mind, half of the people in the class were elders from the local tribe. So it was, Jay basically said, well, I've got a third option. How about I do this? And he just took it up somewhere else. So Jay was a big influence on me. But anyway, so I'm talking to Dwayne about all this. And I said that, I'd been in Bill Holmes' his class, and had, I thought it was so cool, the caricature mask coming out and all this. And I thought that was just so amazing. And Dwayne replied back, I was the one wearing that caricature mask. And I you could have knocked me over with a feather. And then I asked him about the totem pole that you see in front of you, and he gave me a description. And then on my birthday in 2023, I think it was, he sent me this. If I were to print it out, it would be 4 pages long. Basically, his history of how he came to be. He was adopted also into the tribe, and it was I've got it in front of me here. He was adopted into the house of Chief Giel of the Giska or Fireweed clan of Kispiock, BC, in the village of Kispiock on the Kispiock River, a tributary of the Skeena River. So anyway, and he gave me this big, long description, and I'll show you one with some of the pictures he sent with me. But he also gave me a description of this pole. And this is what he said the significance of the pole was. He says the pole depicts a bear at the bottom. So if I zoom in, depicts a bear at the bottom holding a salmon. She is holding a salmon. Above her is eagle rising with the morning sun. So that's the eagle rising with the morning sun. A human face at the top. He said this human face at the top, he misspelled it, but he called it a selfie. And I was like, this guy's 90 plus years old, and so I'm like, maybe he doesn't know what a selfie is. And so I kind of let that ride. And then he says, the top of the Stellar's, at the top there's a Stellar's jay and her brood. Behind the eagle's wings, and it's kind of hard to see from this picture. So let me go back a page. So you can see, oops. Could never tell that I was online entirely during the pandemic. So you can see back here and back here, but back here is this, the eagle's wings are the sun's helpers. And that's the bear cubs in her ear too. You can't see that very well from the front. So anyway, he was very kind with his words and with his information. He gave me a picture of his longhouse, and he talked about how he came to use the symbols that he could use. He's entitled to use the orca, but he calls, and I'm trying to find it in this description here. He uses what he calls the trio: the Stellar's jay, red-tailed hawk, and the sun. And you've got on his house, you've got the red-tailed hawk in form line design. You've got, I believe that's Stellar's jays going down the side, and then also a hawk in the head. And it's also, that's him and his wife at the top. That's their 3 kids and their dog in the middle on top of the bird's head. And so that was one thing he gave me. And then he gave me an example of the trio in a settee that he made. And that's the sun, the red-tailed hawk, and the Stellar's jay. So anyway, he was just a very dear man, and corresponding with him, I knew he would never be able to make the trip down to Sherwood for any rededication that we were going to do, but he was just, he ended up passing away this last July. I got his book before he passed away. He and his wife Betty are amazing. They gave me a copy of his book, Life is Art, or Art is, no, Life is Art. That's it. I always get the two mixed up. But it has helped me immensely in my travels. I also got into 3D printing recently and have 3D printed some formline design outlines, because I'm never very good at a steady hand. So I've got 3D printer models for all of the things out of Bill's book. And then here's my from James Johnson's class out in Port Townsend. So that's my paddle. Again, I like carving. The painting part and the carving after the painting is something I'm getting used to doing. This this was a mess that I made. I was taking a welding art class and I said, well, I'll just do Tlisagila, which is Born to Be the Sun. So I was going to do that. And you can kind of see I took metal, welded it, and then buttered it with bronze. And over the years, it's just gotten really kind of, I love it. It's very dear, but I love it because it's so ugly. Another thing that I did, this is from Jay Havoc's class, Bear. And then here's a paddle that I did from Jay's class also, that I did paint. And this is another event of boredom that I had in a welding art class. I didn't have any more metal to weld, and I had these huge boxes full of welding, I don't know what you call them, the welding rods to use during welding. And so I said, well, hey, I'll just use those. And so I put a bunch of them together and made that. I look, it's just over my shoulder here. That's also supposed to be a raven. And I was going to make the trio, the raven, the crooked beak, and the ho-ho, but I didn't have enough time, or I think the teacher actually caught me using all these welding rods. And that is my journey and how Bill and Dwayne knew each other and were colleagues, and how I got in with them.
That's great, Joe. Thank you for that. I didn't realize you had all that other background. Dwayne Pasco was the driving force on Adam McIsaac getting involved 30 or so years ago with Native American carving. He petitioned Dwayne to take him on as a mentor. Adam told a story that he had to go up and be interviewed. He got a half day of instruction on how to make a knife and what to carve. He said, you go make a knife and carve this and come back and I'll tell you whether I'm going to accept you or not. So Dwayne Pasco is one of these huge resources. And the book that Joel mentioned is available. I found it on Abe Books or Abe Books, and came out of Seattle, and it was first class shape. I will point out Stonington Gallery that I listed here. There'll be a link in it on the PowerPoint presentation. Stonington Gallery has got a huge amount of Native American carvings, including some of Dwayne Pasco's. And on the online archive is linked there. So if you just Google Stonington Gallery near Pioneer Square downtown, you'll be able to kind of do another deep dive into a lot of other objects by a lot of artists. And then there's a Wikipedia on Dwayne that's good. So that would be another resource. I'm going to skip ahead and go now. This is where Lonnie works. This is 8 minutes worth of his shop. And when we're looking at the blurry background is an art gallery, but within it is where he makes all the chips.
These are my go-tos,
Yeah.
and they're junk actually. Oops, let's see. I use this one a lot. I mean, that's one of my go-to tools.
Are they handmade or purchased? Or
These
rented?
are called Kestrel, Kestrel tools. Now, this one is that same one with the tip broken and wore out, so I rebent it. This one used to be that long. It used to be that right there. But over the years, I've sharpened it so much that it's only that long now.
You're making your own handles?
Oh yeah, I make my own handles. And so that's another Kestrel, but they're kind of all junk.
Why do you say junk?
When I see other guys' tools, they're all nice and sharp and everything, but this one used to be that long, you know, but over the years, I keep breaking the tips and resharpen. So I use that a lot.
And you epoxy the blade back on or something? Or what is that?
I epoxy it to hold this string, the twine, in place.
Okay.
It's just the way it works. This one, I really like this. I use it quite a bit because I like the way, the little bit of a bend. Now this one, a friend of mine was making knives. He took some classes, and this one's super sharp, but I just busted the tip off doing those knots. You don't want to pry at all. So that, and this was one of the first knives I ever got when I started, and so that's in the late 70s. I've had this same knife. And this is one I use for, these two I use for hollowing. And then this one's just another not so crooked knife with like a little raven handle.
Carved,
Yeah, I don't get too, I used to make pretty handles and inlay and do all this kind of stuff. Now, it's kind of funny.
How many do you have? 1, 2, 4, 8, 10 adzes, right?
Yeah.
How
And
many different styles? Are they all different?
yeah, they all do different stuff. Let's go with, if I really want to whack on something, you know, and really get going, I'll use this one. It's a little heavy duty, and I made that. It's kind of dull. But that's one that I really can whack with. And I break these things every now and then. I like this one. I made this one.
You made the blade?
Yeah. And, you know, I don't know anything about heat treating or any of that. I just got a piece of metal and ground it all. And it stays pretty sharp. You know, I like it. Okay. This is kind of, I made this one and I hammered it out. And it has a little bit of a curve to it. But that's one I use. Has a little bit of spring, not a lot. But that one's a good one. Okay, when I get to the back, I use this is a Kestrel. You know, and I get the back kind of hollowed out with that.
The back of the mask.
Yeah, back of a mask. Okay. Then, I've had this is the first ads I ever had, and I've had this forever. I mean, you can tell it's got quite a patina to it, and I haven't broken it, you know. And I've reground it a bunch of times, but that's my go-to ads for kind of finishing. Now, I don't know if I invented this or what. But well, here, this is another little ads that I made. You know, they're not big. Totem pole carvers have lot bigger tools. But
You ever use a D-ads?
no, never used one. I found this in an antique store, right? And I don't know what it was, but now I have that, and the angles are way different. I opened the angle way up on this. You got to be careful, but man, there's places in the back of a mask where this really works like a chisel. It's like a chisel on a stick, you know. And you have to be careful because it wants to advance on you. So if you're holding a piece and you start doing this, it starts going uphill, and you got to be real careful with it.
That's an open angle to me?
Yeah, it's open.
open.
Yeah, I opened it up quite a bit, and then that's a kestrel, little kestrel. I use that for. I really opened it up, so it won't pop the chips out like an ads will pop the chips out. This one I use for like the sockets and eyes in a mask, so I can like that, and then come down on it, and it just speeds things up. I got this little guy. I don't use it much. It's one that I don't use much. That's why it's sharper. Everybody down here just loves these these lip adses. I don't use it hardly at all. I don't like it. But I'm kind of set in my ways now.
So to begin with, again, the first one you used to rough out?
Yeah, this big one.
The
I
big
use.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Combination between that and this one. You know, and it won't be long before I break these. You know, because you really get to whacking away.
And you're making those handles?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's whenever I see alder down or whatever, I start looking at the angles, and I'll jump out with my little saw and get always looking for
Spare parts.
spare parts.
Yeah.
So that's about it. That's
And your workbench is just a regular,
that's something I just made.
no, I mean, just you're sitting on, right?
Oh, that's
Stump.
my ads block. And then this was, and I just chopped a hole in it the other day. You can see I've chopped lots of holes in it. But where was it?
Sand?
Sand. Oh yeah, there's a
Sand,
hole right
sand
there.
in a fault.
You know,
Something.
metal guys
Mm.
use it for pounding metal, you know, but it you can put the face of a carving on it, and it just settles into the sand, and it doesn't bruise it. If you just had the ads blocks, the wood will get bruised.
To rough out, will you you're just using straight on the log, or you?
To rough out, I use the straight on the log,
Straight
you
on the
know,
log, yeah.
so I can. But once it gets a little bit of sculpture and stuff, then I put this bag on there.
Hey, he said he cleaned up the shop before I came. He had worked all weekend and he had knee-high chips around him from working a couple of masks.
These are my go-tos.
I'm going to skip ahead to sharpening.
How do you sharpen?
How do I sharpen? I'll show you here real quick. I need to sharpen that one. I've tried everything, you know, from all kinds of stuff, but let's go with 320. Okay,
Really coarse.
really coarse. Yeah, let's see here. I needed to sharpen this one anyway. So anyway, I would just, you got to hold it flat. Okay, that's about that. Okay. 600. Then you can, if you
Start feeling the burr.
Yeah, but there isn't one. Then I'll go with 1,000. And that's about it. And then what I'll do, if there's a little bit of a burr, I'll just put this like this. That's all it takes.
With 1,000.
Feel that.
Yeah.
It's sharp.
Yeah,
It's
very
very,
quick.
very sharp.
And you have a flat workbench to begin with.
Yeah. I don't use it much. I always want to be a professional carver, and those things are spendy.
Yeah.
You know, so I bought one. I sold enough stuff, and it sits in
Hold your
here.
coffee cup.
What?
Hold your coffee cup.
Yeah, pretty much. I'll tell you what,
How often do you cut yourself and how do you take care of it?
I don't.
You don't cut yourself.
No, not much. Not very much. This one, this bench is about a $4,000 bench. This one over here from Harbor Freight, $125 bench. And it's just as good.
I got 2 of those.
Yeah. They're not bad.
No.
You know, for the money.
I put better support under it,
Yeah.
but they work just fine.
Yeah. So, and cutting myself, I mean, in case I do, but you can see I haven't even been into it. So usually if I cut myself, it's, I have my tools in this tool wrap, and when I'm unwrapping it, some of these tips will stick out through and I'll brush up again. But as far as really cutting myself, no.
Yeah.
I have when I'm carving, if you're carving the wrong direction or doing something that you shouldn't be doing, I have a little thing in my head that says reposition.
Yeah.
And I've gotten used to listening to that.
Kicks in.
And it kicks in. So yeah, I try not to. Now I did have a guy that cut himself pretty good. He was in my shop. I forget what he did. He stuck a gouge in his stomach. And he says, Lonnie, I think I might need a Band-Aid. I said, oh, really? Okay. Well, I might need a bigger Band-Aid. Oh boy. Maybe I need a
stitch.
Maybe you need something. And so I gave him a towel. I said, I think I need to take you to the emergency room. I don't know if you've been to emergency rooms. It takes forever. So I tell him, hey, when you go in the emergency room, tell him you just got shot. And I went in with him. Yeah, he just got shot. They took him right in and they fixed him right up. I call him Bullet Bob. But that's the only bad one that I've had. And there's always somebody in a carving class that you're teaching or whatever that'll cut themselves, but they're embarrassed about it and they'll kind of hide it. There's nothing to be embarrassed about.
Yeah.
I know that when I was a little guy with that first pocket knife, I cut my finger right across here. Now it's probably this one right here. Blood everywhere. It was in the house and in the sink. My mom come home from wherever she was at and started to freak because I'm just 5 years old. Blood everywhere. Oh, she came and found me. I was playing. I had a little tree house that we were building. I was out there. I had it wrapped up with some electrical tape or something, you know. I heal pretty fast.
Yeah.
We're going to run out of time a little bit. You're probably going to get tired and run off. I'm going to skip ahead. Yeah, I have a section on wood. I asked him about wood. Everything he does is in alder. And he's got an access to a mill. He gets green alder and he does almost everything in that. We talked about a bit about cedar, but you'll have to watch the other video. I want to go into painting a bit. Here, the next one.
At some point it's dry.
You're right.
And then what? Then what are the steps you take to
Couple things.
Prep it.
Half of my friends that I carve with, they'll give you all kinds of grief about sanding a mask, sanding it. And if you sand them, that grit off the sandpaper will get into your wood. And if you go back over it with a knife, it dulls your knives. Okay, so I'm not good enough that I'll sand, and I hate sanding, but I'll sand these masks. After they're dry, they sand pretty easy. And then if I'm feeling ambitious enough, I'll go back over it with my knife, even though I shouldn't, and give it a texture. But I can't do it unless it's sanded, because my eyes aren't very good and I can't see where I've been. But when that's all said and done and it's finished, then it's time to paint it. That's another thing. How do you know what to paint on there? You know, I mean, there's some basic U forms and stuff but like this beaver mask, you know, I was saying, I need a beaver tail. I was for designing, I was thinking, well, I might do this. Come off this like this, and come off like this, and go like this. Okay, yeah, it's a U form. I'd go like that. And I've been thinking this through. I'm always trying to be aware of balance. And this is going to be black. The whole mask is going to be green. But this will be black. Well, that's too much black right there. So I'll do that. But now it's a beaver. And the beaver has that kind of, when you carve a beaver tail, it has this cross hatching or whatever that's called in the beaver tail. So now this, you'll know that these are beaver teeth, and then you know that this represents the tail. And so that's how I think I'll paint it.
How many grits of sandpaper do you go through?
Oh,
Where do you stop at?
I start with 60 grit, then 80 grit, 120. And after 120, you can go back over it with your knife. Otherwise, then I'll go to 220. I don't sand too heavy. It always wears out my fingers. So then it's ready to paint. And my black paint is special.
Are you putting any kind of sealer or anything? You're painting straight on
I
the,
paint straight
on
on
the
it.
wood.
And I use Joe Sonya's. It's decoy paint, and it's a matte finish, and it's cobalt black. And that's what I use for my black. I squirt it in a little tub, and then I add water to it. I start thinning it till I like the consistency. It takes a little practice to get it just right, but it needs to flow. Otherwise, you're going to be there all night trying
Not raw, not watery, and not peanut butter. Right?
Yeah, exactly right. So when you get it to where you like it, it's just right. It paints like, you can make thin lines. You can paint however you want it. Now, usually the black will not be painted on many end grains, sometimes. But then I use my red, and it gets blotchy. It's the same thing, but it's latex paint from the Martha Stewart or whatever paint, you know, and just a paint chip. And it's latex, cheap, flat paint. I'll add water to it, stir it, but it'll get kind of blotchy at times. So maybe sometimes that's two to three coats of that, and then it's nice. Then the green is pretty temperamental. I usually get it a little too thin because it's just hard to paint, because everything that's going to be painted is on end grain, and like in here and in here. And what happens if you just do one coat, it sucks in the grain. And then when I go to do my final staining, it's real blotchy. So two to three coats of that.
And it's house paint again.
It's house paint. So now we're all painted, and I need to finish it. It looks nice and crisp, and everything's wonderful. I go out in the garage and I get a Scotch-Brite, and I go over the whole thing with a Scotch-Brite, and that kind of raises all the little facets, on the cuts. It'll take the paint off of those a little
Pretty
bit.
fine Scotch-Brite.
Yeah, pretty fine. And what happens when, like, the eyebrows will be black, that's your biggest black. It'll put a patina of dust, black dust over this whole thing, and I don't wipe it off. I just leave it on there. And then I take a walnut Watco oil, and I just splash the whole thing with, wipe it down with.
With the rag?
I use a little paintbrush, a little foam brush.
Mhm.
Sometimes I pour it in the back, and it's a big mess. Then I take a rag and I start wiping it down. I wipe it down and get it pretty all wiped till it's dry, and then I'll take my hair dryer and dry it a little more, and then that'll take that opens up the grain a little bit, and the Watco goes into the grain, and then I'll buff it again, and then every now and then I'll take a mask down and I'll rebuff it, and it starts to get shiny, in places. But that's the process that I use. People try it, they can't do it the way I do it, but
At some point it's dry.
There's one 5-minute, 6-minute wrap up that it's worth doing. If you notice on his bench, this kind of aqua thing that's on his bench, I want to take a look at that. Hang on a minute.
I guess the final question is about arthritis and joints and wearing out and aging
oh yeah,
through all this process. You're not dealing with a lot of dust, which a lot of other people were dealing with, but you have a lot of abuse on your,
my hands.
how is that?
Well, they hurt when I go like that right now. They hurt a little bit. I got a little bone spur right here that just showed up in the last month. And that kind of hurts, but I'm doing pretty good.
You're in good shape. I mean,
My hands are in good shape. The rest of me is not too good. I mean, I personally built, I don't know how many Ronald McDonald houses,
would you say you have arthritis or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They told me I was going to have arthritis when I was 15 years old. I used to race motocross, and I would, not really bust my fingers, but I would thrash them pretty good. And the doc would go like this and go, yeah.
Do you do anything to slow it down or?
No. Just
Stick it in hot water?
just
or
my fork.
Stick it in a hot tub?
No, they're actually, my hands are doing.
So you're not wearing gloves or anything, right?
No, I use this. This is kind of funny. You've heard of Robert Davidson? He's a famous Haida carver. He's a big time guy. And I've been using these for years.
Show me.
And I see a picture of him, and he's got one that's made out of leather. And it's like, I've been doing this before he was even doing it. And what it is when you have your knife, you choke up on it like that. And see my wrist and everything is rubbing on that. If I didn't have that, my wrist would just get abrasive. It would just get chewed up big time. So,
And what are they?
I get these from England Marine in Astoria, and they're long. And
They're forearm protectors or
yeah, for fishermen.
for fishermen?
Yeah,
For the same reason, for,
I think so. But they work. Now, over the years, my arms have shrunk up. I mean, I used to have just giant arms, and Kestrel tool used to get mad at me all the time because I'd take these knives and I would break them. They'd break right across there because I was so strong. It was, and they'd break, you know. But anymore, I'm
are
not.
the Kestrel blades as good today as they were in your early days?
I think so. I wish I had a source for some better blades. That one that I sharpened, the Kestrel won't sharpen that quick or that sharp, and they're fatter. And what I struggle with is form line carving. A lot of these masks, you carve the form lines, or like on the paddle. And like this knife, wouldn't think so, but it's thick enough and not sharp enough that it'll crush the fibers. Where some of these really micro thin, super strong knife won't. It'll so there's just something about it, and that's where the next thing I need to do is. I'm too old now to try to learn how to. I know how to make knives, but I don't want to.
There's a sociology of carvers. A lot of carvers live in the woods. They're isolated, but yet they just carve by themselves and they do the thing. Now, you said you carve with a high-end group. How important is that to you? and
It's
how does that
really
work?
important. I'm more social. I would go nuts out in the woods by myself. We get together once a month in the winter and a couple times during the summer. And there are a bunch of guys, and they're really good, and we just have a blast.
They meet here, or do you rotate?
Sometimes they're here. Sometimes they're at the Muckleshoot boys. They're the Muckleshoot tribe up there in Auburn. They have a carving shed. That's all they do. And they'll host a carvathon. Angel of the Winds has a carving shed. There's a guy over on Whidbey Island that carves for the Jamestown guys, and he's kind of quit carving, so we don't go there anymore. But we used to go there, so we kind of move around, and it's fun. We bring food, we talk, we BS,
And you carve
and carve
whatever you want to carve.
whatever we want to carve. And some guys don't; they just sit there. Or some guys, you know, it's just fun. It's good for your soul, pretty much.
You've
Yeah.
hung out at the Coastal Carver Show in Lincoln City. Do you hang out at any other shows?
No, I used to go to one in Puyallup. Used to be members of the Lower Columbia Carvers.
In Longview.
Yeah, but
I guess the final question is about,
That is where I'm going to stop, folks. What's fascinating, this was I had 3 hours of videotape and you probably saw 60 minutes. So it was ad hoc questions sitting there with a guy that's been at this for over 60 years. And it's really quite remarkable. And he's still learning, right? I mean, this is the name of the game. I'm humbled by how little I know, and the more I find out, the more I realize I don't know. And he's been at it for a long time. And this is kind of the analogy with Jack Giles, who we had here in, I think, November. Carousel, the lead carver on the Carousel project in Albany, and John Culver, who was here, has carved 3 of those animals. It's humbling to realize the magnitude of some of these efforts. And I always think of carousel animals as being the top of the food chain, the top of the pyramid for carving. But some of these big totem poles and other big structures are kind of in that same category. And then you realize you go to other cultures. I try to feel them out about masks because we see African art and we see the Pacific Islanders masks. I mean, masks are a part of a lot of cultures. It's not just the Native American, First Nations kind of things that we see. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking. Does anybody want to unmute yourself and make a comment about anything that you would like to share? Anybody that's doing some of this carving that I don't know and that you would like to share and just identify yourself in any way? Be brave. Everybody's smiling, quiet.
Let me add just one little observation that I made this just recently, and I was talking to a fellow that carves masks, and his masks were especially beautiful and peaceful or happy, maybe not joyful, but at least happy. And we talked about masks having power. And because I never really wanted to have a mask on my wall to scare me every time I walked into the room. And I told him that, and he said, "Oh, that's because the masks you had in your past, or you knew about in your past, they had power." And so I've been thinking a lot about that. So now I look at masks a little bit more deeply about what kind of power do you have and what kind of message are you sending?
Yeah, and I will point out he mentioned Dick Wilk or Wilkes. I think it's Wilk. Dick has been coming to Vancouver to teach for 5 days almost every summer for a long time. As far as I know, he will be here again in August at the Northwest Carving Academy for 5 days in Ellensburg, Washington in early July, sort of after the 4th, mid-July time frame. He goes back to Seattle. He has got deep experience. He fell in love with carving at the Seattle World's Fair in 1962. And he's been carving ever since. And he gives everything away. He doesn't sell it. And he does different projects. He did a mini totem poles a few years ago. We did a goose bowl in the class that I took, and I realized this is hard work. And it's still sitting unfinished in a bag, getting moldy, and it will never get finished. This year, he's done rattles, he's done masks. I don't know for sure what he'll do, but watch the newsletter. And what's interesting is that a lot of these carving and woodworking classes, can cost upwards of $500 a week. He charges $100 for the 5 days. And it's just really a bargain. It's in a nice facility at a private, in the art room of a private high school, and right off I-5 in Hazelville in Vancouver. So that's a resource. We haven't been able to get ourselves organized to ask Adam McIsaac to teach again for us. He's taught a few classes, and he's a professional. He's really busy, and there's just lots of opportunities to kind of dive into this. So we scratched the surface, we scratched an itch. I hope you learned something tonight. Joel left, but he asked a question about cultural appropriation, which is a big topic, right? So making money off of other people's art. And when Lonnie was talking about this side of it, particularly I started with that segment at the very beginning about motivation, why people want to do this. And, it is the art and it's the craft. We look at the tools, we look at the techniques of doing this work, but it really comes back to the art. And Bill Holmes documented at least a part of that. He did not document the art of the Columbia River Basin tribes, which is what Adam McIsaac has specialized in. if you haven't watched the Adam McIsaac video archive from a couple of years ago that I pointed to earlier on, you ought to take a look at that because there's a whole nother deep dive into that. I've been very interested in the Evergreen College Native American Studies operation there. They have quite a facility in cultural education. I stopped by, my daughter lives in Puyallup, so I get up there. And I stopped there during COVID, but it was all locked up. And I asked Lonnie about it, and he said, basically, it's a pretty closed society. That they're not. A lot of the people aren't so willing to share their own art, their own techniques, kind of thing. So it's this highly sensitive issue about how we think about that, particularly with Native Americans, but it's got to be true for every culture. Whether we're copying and selling and making money on the work of any culture around the world. I don't know how to think about it. I'm not going to I have no insights other than aware of that. Our library, we have a library. 4 years ago, we had no library. Today, we have 500 books in the library. We have a few on Native American carvings. We have no place to store it. So we came up with a concept of just what I call a micro-distributed library. We are going to take all the books and ask every member to take 10. And so if 100 members, if half of them take 10, we have 500 books distributed. It's all documented. On the website is a list of the catalog that we have, pretty accurate of what is there, so you can find them. Julie has volunteered to be the repository for the Native American collection. So somebody else can be the collection, whatever, right? So we have these resources. We have a vast tool library that's been donated, all for the purpose of helping attract new carvers and support the existing ones. Okay, any comment? Anybody? Simon, Zena, John, Steve,
I'll
anybody?
say, yeah, I'm new to carving. I've only done a few things, but I have been working on masks for the last couple of years, mostly in paper mache, but I've also been trying to do it in wood, and I very much resonate with what Julie said and how masks have power, and they kind of are charged with the being that they're based on. And I've been diving deep into Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung, focusing on archetypes, and so this is just really cool to see. And I put in the chat, another great mask carver is Scott Jensen, who was, yeah, just an amazing sculptor and carver. So highly recommend checking out his work, and hopefully I'll be taking a class soon.
Hmm. Is this a hobby for you, Zena, or is it a profession, or what's driving your interest?
I'm a designer by trade, but that's mostly digital. And I do teach a couple of classes at Wildcraft here in Portland. So I'm a mixed media artist through and through. So I'd say it's a little bit more than a hobby, but not quite a full-on profession.
I love Wildcraft.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I'm personally struck by the stories that are told by Lonnie and others. There's another guy named Jim Bergeron who was a featured speaker. He's got a video on how to make ads. So if you ever want to go down that path and make your own ads, let me know, because he's got a video that's available. And we have some in the library, and he's in his mid-80s now, so he's slowing down quite a bit. But he's got quite a diverse background on exploring variation of bentwood boxes and masks and all kinds of stuff. But there's a lot of interesting angles to this thing. Bedtime.
Larry?
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, I might just share a little something here. I became enamored with Northwest Indian art as a child going to the Portland Art Museum because they had a standing exhibit and maybe still do, but they had it for many years. And then just explored it over time, living here in the Pacific Northwest and traveling. A couple of things that I ran across, well, I guess several decades ago, but fairly recently, was Hillary Stewart. Now, maybe you've got a number of her books in your library, but one of them is just called Cedar, and it's an incredible book that talks about the importance of primarily Western red cedar to the tribes, to the native people, and all the many uses they made of cedar. She then published a few other books, one of them called Totem Poles, that talks about, as you might guess, totem poles.
Yeah.
Another excellent book, and then she's got one that I found really fascinating because I've got a background with fish and wildlife, and fished for a number of years and never get out and do enough fishing. But she's got one called Indian Fishing, and it's not just carving fish, but it's, as I talked earlier about halibut hooks, using native materials to catch fish, nets, halibut hooks, etc. So anyway, if you aren't familiar with Hillary Stewart, I strongly recommend it.
Thank you. I've seen those from a distance, but I've never taken the time. That's great. We had a non-skiing winter vacation in Whistler some years ago, and there's a very important, very nicely done museum, cultural center there that also did a deep dive into Western red cedar and how all the various ways. Okay. That's it for now. We have a picnic on the last Saturday in July. It will be at Julie Niemeyer's place off south of Beaverton, Aloha. So maybe you can see some of her work in process and have fun and network and meet people. So that's coming up. Other than that, stay tuned to the newsletter. We'll see you later. Okay.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
Nice
Good
show.
night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you.